So welcome everybody who are following on our conference series, Philosophy and Visual Arts. We are glad to present the conference today. First I will present in Portuguese and then I will go back to you in English. Bem-vindos todos e todas que estão acompanhando o nosso ciclo de conferências Filosofia e Artes Visuais. Hoje a gente tem o prazer de receber o Luca Siniscalco. O Luca Siniscalco estudou filosofia na Università degli Studi di Milão e na Universität Karl von Ossietzky, em Oldenburg, na Alemanha. Atualmente é doutorando em estudos humanísticos transculturais na Università degli Studi di Bergamo, na Itália, em regime de cotutela com a Justus Liebig Universität de Gießen, um projeto de pesquisa intitulado O Evento do Sagrado na Era Pós-Secular, Encontros com a Hermenêutica de Hans-Georg Gadamer e a Arte de Hermann Nietzsche e Anselm Kiefer. Já foi professor contratado de Estética na Universidade de Milão e na Università e Campus, ministra cursos de Filosofia e Literatura no projeto acadêmico Uni3Edu, editou ensaios de Junger, Zombart, Thompson, Hexel, Josifovich, Nietzsche, entre outros. É editor de Antares, Perspective Antimoderne, e das revistas acadêmicas Informazione Filosofica, Medium e Medialità. E seus artigos e ensaios foram publicados em diversas revistas científicas e divulgação em jornais e inúmeras antologias. Também curou diversas exposições de arte individual e coletiva. So now in English. Our conference today will be held by Master Luca Siniscalco. He studied philosophy at the Università degli Studi di Milano in Italy and at the Karl von Ossietzky University of Oldenburg in Germany. He's currently a PhD candidate in transcultural humanistic studies at the Università degli Studi di Bergamo under a co-tutel agreement with the Justus Liebig Universität Gießen, with a research project entitled The Events of the Sacred in Post-Secular Age, Encounters with Hans-Georg Gadamer Hermeneutics, Hermann Nietzsche, and Anselm Kiefer Art. He was formerly an adjunct professor of aesthetics at the Università degli Studi di Milano with the Uni3Edu academic project. He has edited essays by Junger, Zombart, Thompson, and other ones, among others. He serves as editor for Antares, Perspective Antimoderne, and the academic journal Informazione Filosofica, Medium e Medialità, Education and Learning Styles. Furthermore, his articles and essays have appeared in numerous scientific and popular journals, newspapers, and various anthologies. He was also curated several art exhibitions, solo and collective. And today, Luca will present us with the conference, The Way of World Wisdom, Anselm Kiefer's Transcreation of Martin Heidegger's Philosophy. Luca, thank you very much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear Romulo, for the nice introduction and especially for the invitation. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to participate to this great series of events, Philosophy and the Visual Arts, whose main topic is really at the core of my research and personal interest. So thank you for having invited me and for giving me this opportunity to share my research and my reflection with you. And thank you also to Laura Mosburger for the participation. I will present my research through some slides. Of course, many Kiefer's artworks will be showed because they are quite important as visual support to my theoretical introduction. The title of my presentation, as you can see, is Anselm Kiefer's Transcreation of Martin Heidegger's Philosophy. The aim of my presentation is to explore the profound and multifaceted dialogue between Anselm Kiefer's artistic practice and theoretical reflections and Martin Heidegger's philosophy. It traces the ways in which Heidegger's thought informs the ontological, poetic, and mythopoetic dimensions of Kiefer's aesthetics. From his early reflections on Heidegger's ambiguous relationship with National Socialism to his later meditations on the revelatory function of art, Kiefer indeed persistently engaged Heidegger as both a philosophical interlocutor and a symbolic presence. The aim of my presentation is an attempt to clarify this connection in order to reflect particularly on two interconnected dimensions that make this research hopefully an emblematic case study. The first thematic core I would like to touch is indeed the enduring legacy of Martin Heidegger's philosophy within contemporary culture and aesthetics. So if we adopt Hans-Georg Gadamer's lexicon, we could speak about the Wirkungsgeschichte, the history of effects of Heidegger's philosophy. And second point, more general, the methodological aspect, the methodological dimension connected to the examination of the relationship between philosophy and art within an hermeneutical methodology. This relationship, in my perspective and through Kiefer's and Heidegger's theory, should not be understood in terms of mimesis, imitation, or mere inspiration, but rather as an evenemential transcreation, an event of meanings irradiation that unfolds across media and disciplines, as exemplified here in the interplay between visual art and philosophy. In order to discuss this theoretical connection, I need to start with a brief introduction to Anselm Kiefer, who is maybe not, although extremely famous within the context of contemporary art, maybe is not so well known in a philosophical context. Kiefer is a living German artist. He was born in 1945 in Donaueschingen and stands currently as one of the most significant figures in contemporary European art. His rich artistic production, developed primarily through monumental paintings and installations, engages with several compelling thematic constellations. Among these, I can briefly mention the most common and relevant: the interest for Germany's tragic history, especially in connection with National Socialist ideology and political regime, and anti-Semitism, and the functions of remembrance and mourning connected to this reflection. But also the symbolic and sculptural role of books, which Kiefer depicts in several installations in lead material, the creative and hermeneutical power of Jewish mysticism, and the philosophical dimensions of nature and landscape. These topics are just few among the several existential and philosophical questions that Kiefer's art try to engage with. Kiefer treats these subjects through a very rich chain of hermeneutical references, nourished by his extensive narrative, poetic, and philosophical readings, together with his deep engagement with the religious and mytho-symbolic traditions. References to authors such as the Russian poet Vladimir Klebnikov, the German poet Paul Celan, Ingeborg Bachmann, the French author Jean Genet, Louis Ferdinand Céline, James Joyce, and many others, intertwined with imagery drawn from Christian theology, yoga, Jewish Kabbalah, Greek-Roman mythology, and even Egyptian cosmogonies. The interrelation of images, often inscribed directly onto the surfaces of canvases in words or images and symbols, serves as a vehicle for Kiefer to construct dense clusters of meaning. Through these, he invites the viewer to experience a form of knowledge that reveals the labyrinthine and enigmatic dimension of reality, conceived as emanating from a mysterious, unfounded foundation, an origin in which the end and the beginning paradoxically coincide. Human existence, in this view, is directed toward that origin, beyond both dogmatic and ideological closure, and equally beyond the nihilistic refusal of meaning or the materialistic reduction of life to analytic determination and calculation. Art, religion, and mysticism thus sustain this path of inquiry. Empirical perception, science, and reason capture only one facet of reality. Symbolic and mystical forms teach endurance, the art which Kiefer defines in an interview, a conversation with the theologian Klaus Dermuth, an act of soldering on the face of meaningless. So a strong self-positioning in front of nihilism. As expressed in the proto-nihilist romantic tradition and later elaborated by Nietzsche, art can generate better, more vital illusions, helping humanity to navigate historical suffering while nurturing an appetite for life. The artistic illusion, in this sense, becomes a more concrete, efficient, and creative illusion, a means of organizing reality in ways that render it more meaningful and existentially intelligible. For Kiefer, knowledge is always in a state of already and not yet, reflecting the fact that the becoming of reality never presents itself as a boundless or exhaustible object of investigation. Kiefer's aesthetics emphasize the processes of transformation, becoming, but never as a path toward relativism. Behind the illusion of the illusion, there lies an invisible shimmer, a glimmer of the origin, which must be discovered through an ongoing hermeneutical conversation. To conclude this brief introduction to Kiefer's aesthetics and somehow worldview, I just want to briefly show you the very famous studio of Kiefer in French in the small town of Barjac. This studio is called La Ribot, and it's a very huge area where Kiefer built a vast complex of hangars, underground galleries, and lead towers, resembling both cathedrals and cemeteries. Here you can see it through different pictures, where his word-making imagination materialized in architectural forms. And recently, Kiefer has been popularized also through a movie directed by the very important author Wim Wenders. The movie is called Anselm. It's a documentary film released in 2023, offering a powerful visual meditation on Kiefer's life, artistic vision, and metaphysical inquiry. And here you can see an image of Kiefer together with the creator of the movie, Wim Wenders. In the title of my presentation, you have heard the concept of transcreation, which now I would like to briefly introduce and explain. I would like to adopt this notion in order to explain Kiefer's artistic resonance with Heidegger's philosophy, in order to move beyond a merely mimetic or representational approach. This term, in my intention, designates Kiefer's creation of visual works through the, so to speak, transfer of Heidegger's images and sensibility from the domain of philosophical concepts into that of the visual arts. The paradigm of transcreation invites us to abandon the modern subjectivist perspective, one broadly criticized by both Heidegger and Kiefer, and instead to understand the artwork as the irradiation of an originary archetypal meaning that transcends the individual artist or intellectual. This idea rests on the awareness that every artistic configuration of form and meaning, when directly influenced by a specific source, in this case Heidegger's philosophy, is not a linear transcription of the same meaning into another expressive medium. Rather, it involves an active and necessary reconfiguration of that meaning, arising not only from the interpreter's creative stance and the material constraints of the new artistic language, but also from the metamorphic, rhizomatic life of meaning itself. From this point of view, artistic translation from philosophical sources should not be understood as imitation, reproduction, or copying, but as a trans-creative act of rewriting. This rewriting exists in a dynamic one-to-one relationship with the original source, contributing to the redefinition of its structure, reception, and at an essential level, its dynamic ontology. There is no univocal causal determination between the original and its transformation, nor can one assert the ontological primacy of the former over the latter. The relation between these two poles continuously reconfigures not only the appearance of the copy phenomenon, but also the meaning and structure of the original principle itself. Applying this paradigm to the study of art, what emerged, in my opinion, is the co-implication of the source of inspiration and its artistic translation. The latter, the artistic translation, exerts an active and performative influence even upon the original itself, and also upon its historical reception. Every act of redefinition touches upon essential indeterminacy, and every rewriting constitutes a variation justified by the original, which, at the same time, retroactively justify the original itself, clarifying its constitutive features. This model of resonance, a concept which I derive from the sociological notion popularized by Hartmut Rosa, enables us to rethink in a non-univocal and non-deterministic way the relationship between an artist and his intellectual sources. It also invites us to consider the Fortleben, to use Walter Benjamin's term, the afterlife or virtual fate of a text, its ongoing presence and resonance through history and cultural development. The hermeneutical translation of philosophical concepts into visual images corresponds closely with Heidegger's own attempt to overcome the conceptual language of Western metaphysics. His project of poetic thinking seeks to enable human beings to dwell poetically, to exist authentically in relation to the world by allowing things to reveal themselves and by responding to their being through language, or in Kiefer's case, through a visual language. Heidegger's conviction that the poetic and imaginative dimension of thought must supplement rational knowledge serves to inaugurate a mode of thinking capable of artistically connecting human existence in the world with the profound ontological structures of the cosmos. Thus, in this presentation, we focus on a phenomenon that stands as the inverse of the classical process or rhetorical figure of ekphrasis. Here, it is not a written text that describes visual artworks, but visual artworks that radiate written images through a process of iconic translation, or through the concept I'm trying to adopt, transcreation. So given this methodological framework and this before the introduction to Kiefer, we can now proceed to the close reading and to the comparison and the dialogue between the two authors. In my opinion, there are two main areas of topics and concepts on which we can bring in dialogue Kiefer and Heidegger. The 20th century German history, and we'll now delve into this topic, and then a more broad perspective on philosophy of art and a sort of cosmogonical art, as we'll see later. So starting from this first area of interest, we need to point out that Heidegger's philosophy and biography serve as an inspirational, or at least a resonant point of reference for multiple aspects of Kiefer's work, even those that appear at first glance to be distant from one another. In his complex relationship with Heidegger, Kiefer first addresses, at least that's what I discover in my preliminary researches, the philosopher's ambiguous ties to National Socialism, which Kiefer particularly explores in a very fascinating artist book named Martin Heidegger, produced in 1976. Unfortunately, I was able to find this very small image, but you can see there the three different pages of the artist book and the image of Heidegger. Here in this book, which was conceived in the year of Heidegger's death, Kiefer depicts the philosopher portrait alongside a series of mixed media images that suggest the progressive implantation within the mind of the author of Sein und Zeit of National Socialist perspectives and ideas. These are represented as a sort of tumor that invades and darkens his brain, culminating in the final pages covered entirely with thick layers of black paint. This work stands as a seminal contribution to the extensive debate on Heidegger's political responsibilities, a debate that has developed in several waves, particularly following the recent publication of the Black Notebooks, the Schwarze Hefte. But within Kiefer's own aesthetics, this trajectory is strictly connected with his more famous series called Heroische Sinnbilder, Heroic Symbols in English, from 1965. And it reconnects with Kiefer's preoccupation with memory and historical reenactment as acts of mourning. Presented for his degree show at the Karlsruhe Academy of Fine Arts, the series portrays Kiefer himself dressed in military attire and giving the Nazi salute before European monuments and landscapes. This politically charged performance, documented in photographs, functions as a kind of ironic grand tour through Italy, France, Switzerland, and the Rhine region. The project's central idea was to reactivate symbolic imagery exploited by German National Socialism, reclaiming German identity for alternative ideological roots. The work's political critique was inseparable from its acknowledgement of the controversial and ambiguous connections between German high culture and the condemned ideology of the Third Reich. Heidegger's political implications are also evoked, although in a very symbolic way, in this 1980 painting named Todtnauberg, which refers to the area where the famous Heidegger's Hütte, his house, was located in the Black Forest. But this artwork also alludes to Paul Celan's poem Todtnauberg, which recounts Celan's fraught encounter with the philosopher. Paul Celan is probably the most relevant literary source of inspiration for Kiefer, so we can imagine that also that his poem is very well known to the painter. In this painting, the reflection is extended through a dark, brooding image dominated by poisonous white mushrooms, symbols of contamination and decay, here evoking Nazism as a parasitic, cancerous growth. Kiefer later returned to this theme in his photographic series for Martin Heidegger, Todtnauberg, which is quite recent, in which Heidegger's genius loci is evoked through direct depiction of the natural landscape. The atmosphere is imbued with a quasi-neo-romantic sensibility. Nature itself seems to resonate with the intellectual force and inner tension of Heidegger's thought. Heidegger's spectral presence also reappears in the series The Ways of World Wisdom, where figures such as Hegel, Feuerbach, Marx, Schopenhauer, Heidegger, Nietzsche, and Jung are portrayed as spectral presences in German tradition. You can easily recognize Heidegger as the central figure on the down part of the painting. The artwork testifies visually to Kiefer's preoccupation with the ideological compromises of the German intelligentsia during the Nazi regime. His concern, however, is not one of moralistic condemnation, but of hermeneutical confrontation, an effort, as a German, to understand the ideological fascination that bound his people and to reclaim and somehow purify through a sort of cathartic action pre-Nazi intellectual traditions. This process aims to purify those traditions from both ideological contamination and the post-war censorship that sought to suppress them. For Kiefer, reappropriating German culture, while acknowledging its complicity, represents an opportunity to reread it as a meaningful theoretical and existential resource. As one of the most relevant scholars in Kiefer studies observes, I refer to Daniel Arras, what is at stake in the work of commemoration that occupied Kiefer from 1969 to the early 90s can be summarized in the following question. How can anyone be a German artist since the elements of the German artistic and cultural identity were irremediably compromised by their ability to satisfy and serve the Third Reich itself? And this reflection is particularly connected with the engagement and dialogue with Heidegger figure. Heidegger also appears as a name in this painting, the German line of spiritual salvation. Here, recurring motifs of sky and earth appear. Hegel's tradition is visually linked to the symbol of the rainbow, while Nietzsche's tradition is grounded in the heart, probably an allusion to the famous Nietzsche's topic of the faith in the heart. Here the picture is a bit small, but you should be able to read, or you can imagine, to read the names of the authors, which are mentioned by Kiefer. We see near the rainbow Hegel, Feuerbach, and Marx, while Heidegger is written in the brown, dark section of the painting in the within Nietzsche's tradition. Illustrious protagonists of German cultural tradition are also represented in this other painting, The Path of World Wisdom, Hermann's Battle, and in Varus, which is another one. Yet Kiefer's engagement with German philosophy, especially Heidegger, who remained his most important philosophical interlocutor, extends well beyond the historical political sphere. It is equally bound the theoretical challenges of modernity poses for humanity and the aesthetic question to which only philosophy, together with myth and symbol, according to Kiefer, can offer reorientation. At times, Kiefer minimized Heidegger's influence, perhaps reflecting discomfort with the contradictory philosopher figures. And we need to acknowledge that. For example, commenting on his relation to Heidegger in 1987, Kiefer remarked, and I read the quote that derives from an interview with Donald Kuspit. "I'm interested in Heidegger's ambivalence. I'm not familiar with his books, but I know he was a Nazi. How is it that such a brilliant mind was taken in by the Nazis? How could Heidegger be so socially irresponsible? It is the same problem as with Céline. Here is a wonderful writer who was a rotten anti-Semite. How do these thinkers, who seem so intellectually right and perceptive, come to such socially stupid and commonplace positions?" And here Kiefer refers to the artwork we have seen, saying, "I have shown Heidegger's brain with a mushroom-like tumor growing out of it to make this point. I want to show the ambivalence of his thinking, the ambivalence of all thinking. Ambivalence is the central theme of all my work. There is no place so ambivalent as Germany." While Kiefer here claimed unfamiliarity with Heidegger's works and reduced his interest to the topic of ambivalence, the scholar Matthew Byro, in his book Anselm Kiefer and the Philosophy of Martin Heidegger, has shown otherwise, noting that Kiefer's 1963 student diary, written in France, already displays knowledge of Heidegger's thought, and the early works, such as Ex-sistenz, which we'll see later, point toward a sustained philosophical engagement. Furthermore, in a 2004 interview, Kiefer admits, "I will say that I was more of a disciple of Heidegger than of Beuys." Beuys was a German artist who exert a relevant legacy, relevant mastership toward Kiefer. So this declaration is quite important because often Kiefer is considered somehow a disciple of Beuys. But here he say, "I will say that I was more of a disciple of Heidegger than of Beuys, even though I never met him, but I was born 30 kilometers from where he lived." So that the interlocutor of this interview even hypothesized that Kiefer could be described as the painter of Heidegger's Dasein. Furthermore, beyond specific direct influences, resonance in and shared sensibilities towards the philosophical and existential challenges of their age are striking. Now, I would like, Now I would like to address the second part of the discussion, the most philosophical one, trying to address the philosophical affinity between Kiefer's worldview and Heidegger's theory. What Kiefer seems to derive from Heidegger, particularly from the essay The Origin of the Work of Art, Der Ursprung des Kunstwerkes, pivotal Heidegger's work of 1936, is the understanding of art's epiphanic dimension as an ontological event. Art as the privileged site where the event of truth takes place. Although Heidegger's position entails a sharp critique of the notions of image and representation, especially presented in his essay The Age of the Word Picture, his conception of art as the topology of truth revelation ultimately situates him within a latent iconophile perspective. Heidegger's critical interpretation of imagination leaves open the possibility of re-evaluating this notion through an evenemential lens, that is, a lens based on the concept of event, Ereignis in Heidegger's terminology. Imagination, though, understood not as a subjective faculty, but, to quote Heidegger's contributions to philosophy, as the event itself, wherein all transfiguration occurs, or as the occurrence of the clearing itself. Since art necessarily manifests itself through images, any attribution of truth disclosure to art cannot be conceived apart from a constructive engagement with images. Art, like truth itself, exists in a dynamic interplay of concealment and unconcealment, as Heidegger famously argues in the pivotal essay The Origin of the Work of Art. The essay explores the possibility of a phenomenological encounter with art, treating the discovery of its ontology as a means of overcoming modern aesthetic subjectivism, which Heidegger virulently accused of leading to nihilism. To transcend this impasse, he directs attention not to the artist as a creative genius, nor to the spectator as perceiving subject, but to the essence of the artwork itself. Quoting Heidegger, what is at work in the artwork? After a long and articulate stream of reflections, he concludes that the artwork can open a world, unifying a coherent and meaningful historical universe with manifold internal relations. By the opening of a world, Heidegger explains, all things gain their lingering and hastening, their distance and proximity, their breadth and their limits. If modern aesthetics, in continuity with Western metaphysics, conceives the artistic experience as a dialectic between subject, the artist or spectator, and object, the artwork, Heidegger's ontology of art emphasized the pre-dualistic autonomy of the artistic event itself, which precedes and grounds this distinction between subject and object. He formulates this circular insight, characteristic of hermeneutical thinking, in the sentence, the artist is the origin of the work is the origin of the artist, creating this hermeneutical circular connection. Both artist and artwork take place within the horizon of art as epiphany. And the essence of art is the descending upon in both the artwork and the artist. This marks a decisive paradigm shift from the dominant modern aesthetics focus on perception or experience to an ontology of art as event of disclosure. Kiefer's complementary adoption of Heidegger's imagery confirms its power to render the truth of being, of Sein, in German, perceptible to those in relation with the artwork. As Matthew Byro observes, and I quote a sentence from his book, certainty and doubt about the realistic representation, the search for new true ways of seeing, as well as their constant critique and formal dismantling, this dialectic rests at the heart of the cultural production of Kiefer and Heidegger as well. Kiefer's existentialist concern, expressed in works such as the watercolor that you can see in this slide, called in German Ex-sistenz, from 1975, connects openly to Heidegger's philosophy. Heidegger coined the term Ex-sistenz to rearticulate the analytic of Dasein, emphasizing that human being cannot be reduced to its present properties, but stands out, referring to the Greek expression ek, in the clearing of being. So existence with the meaning of standing out within the clearing of being. Humanity is not simply one entity among others, but as Dasein, the being who dwells in the openness of being. In the letter on humanism, Briefe über den Humanismus, Heidegger writes, what man is, or as it is called in the traditional language of metaphysics, the essence of man, lies in his ex-sistenz. Ex-sistenz, thought in terms of ecstasis, does not coincide with existentia in either form or content. In terms of content, ex-sistenz means standing out into the truth of being. Elsewhere, particularly, still in the same text, in another passage, he adds, man is rather thrown from being itself into the truth of being, so that existing in this fashion, he might guard the truth of being in order that beings might appear in the light of beings as the beings they are. This notion re-emerged in Kiefer's later work Ex-sistenz from 2011, where a monumental mountain range rises from clouds in post-romantic grandeur. On its peak, Kiefer fixed metal scales holding diverse materials, a symbolic echo of Heidegger's existential meditation. Among Heideggerian motifs that Kiefer, we could say, transcreates into visual forms, one of the most striking is the massive painting, which is 2008 meter per 750 meters, Das Geviert in German, in English, the Fourfold, which refers to the very famous and important concept of Heidegger's philosophy. Although, as you can see, there is no explicit visual reference, but I will try to present the meaning of this painting, hopefully trying to find a connection between the image and the Heideggerian's concept. The architectural structure was likely inspired by a brickwork that Kiefer encountered during his travels in India, which are documented in his diaries. The building was in a constant state of construction and destruction. Newly made bricks were stacked on top of it and subsequently replaced as they were sold. Plumes of smoke suggest fires burning within. Abstracted from its context, this structure becomes an allegory of impermanence and ephemerality. Its stepped pyramidal form recalls the tombs of the Egyptian pharaohs, Babylonian ziggurats, and Mesoamerican teocalli, all remnants of ancient civilizations. Here we don't have the time, the chance to discuss this topic, but I just want to mention that the topic of ruins is one of the other most relevant within Kiefer artistic production. So this pyramid is somehow a ruinous pyramid, but not just in a negative sense. It's in itself an event of deconstruction and reconstruction. In the four corners of the composition, although in this image are written in a small format, so maybe you cannot see, but I assure you that we can find the inscriptions of the four elements which stand at the core of Heidegger's image of Fourfold, which are the heart, the sky, the divinity, and the mortals, which correspond to the fundamental elements of Heidegger's concept of the Geviert. Heidegger uses this notion as a theoretical framework to describe the totality of reality, the physis, the nature in Greek sense. The Fourfold thus emerged as a figure revealing the interconnection of being, condensed into a single visual optic that captures the presence of things and the worlding of the world in which Dasein participates. In this ontological relation, the four are one, and the one is four. Earth, sky, gods, and mortals are united, quoting Heidegger, in the single fold of the unifying Fourfold. Heidegger attempts to speak of all four simultaneously, aiming to push European thought beyond representational thinking, which he defines in German Vorstellenden Denken, by embracing the hermeneutical power of relationality. In this sense, this image exemplifies what we can define Heidegger's mythopoetic hermeneutics in enactment, a visual reconfiguration of this ontological process. This ontology, in which enacted imaginations play a pivotal role in approaching the disclosure of being and its radiations, resonates with Kiefer's interest in the figure of quaternity, which is represented in other Kiefer's paintings as a sort of new theological image where the Christian Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are reunited with the negative aspect of reality symbolized by the devil, Satan, above all, resonates with Kiefer's attempt to re-enchant the world, to fight the disenchantment of the world theorized by Max Weber. The image, in Kiefer's practice, is rejected both in its mimetic approach and its potential hegemonic function of simulacra, in the sense theorized by Baudrillard. Instead, it is conceived as a visual translation of the inner dialogue between the artist and the world's disclosure. The fourfold cannot be artistically evoked by simply attempting to mimic Heidegger's theorization of its four poles, that is, by figuratively depicting them as one may expect. Rather, it requires an attentiveness to its deep capacity to allow new forms and figures to emerge. In this way, even a ruinous Eastern architectural structure, as we can see in this image, can be dwelt as a place of disclosure. As the Italian scholar Federico Vercellone aptly argues, discussing Kiefer's interpretation of Das Geviert, art here expresses a necessity of recosmization. In this context, Kiefer appears to interpret his role in the manner of the poet described by Heidegger in his seminal text Wozu Dichter, as well as in his writings on Friedrich Hölderlin. According to the art critique, the Italian art critique Germano Celant, these influences are multifaceted in Kiefer's work, since the painter believes in the essence and power of poetry, which creates new conditions for being. Here, poetry is understood, of course, not merely as a literary genre, but as the poetic, imaginative, and demiurgic function of art, which manifests through words and images. Artistic activity unfolds within the polarity between rhythm and structured form, which, according to Kiefer, Heidegger expresses through the notion of stiften in German. And Kiefer explicitly discusses this notion in an interview released in 1998, where he reflects on Heidegger's concept. The poet, I read the quotation, "Stift ein Werk," creates a work. This means that he captures something. Heidegger considers this a sublime moment, and he is right, but for me it is also sad. I feel that there is a kind of conflict when I work on something limited in my studio, while life continues around me. Perhaps my habit of constantly moving paintings around, letting them evolve before returning to them several months or years later, is an attempt to react to this frustration, to give the painting a kind of life while it continues to work on its own. Heidegger's profound meditation on existence is thus transfigured by Kiefer into a hermeneutical conception of art as an existential dialogue between humanity and the cosmos, a cosmological creativity that generates new orders of meaning. Or better, we could say that helps these already existing orders of meaning to emerge, to appear, to be revealed. His works express the human attempt to dwell poetically in a world where past and future, myth and history coexist in a continuous interplay of temporalities, an ontology that echoes Heidegger's reflection of temporality in Sein und Zeit. For another topic, which here I just briefly mentioned, which could be interesting for future researches or for the discussion, is also the topic of technology, which Heidegger famously addressed, especially in his text Die Frage nach Technik, the question of technology. And also Kiefer is extremely interested in the issue of techne, in all his historical tradition and in relationship to artistic usage of technical skills. And in Kiefer's view, technology has also a very deep spiritual dimension, which Kiefer especially connects to the tradition of alchemy. There are many interviews where Kiefer declares to feel as a sort of modern alchemist, and his use, for example, of fire in order to modify his canvases is deeply connected with this symbolism of elements and of reality transformation. But here I just briefly mentioned this other topic. The last section of my presentation introduces a new author, an Italian philosopher, Andrea Emo, who has been a late discovery in Kiefer's philosophical reading, but extremely important and discussed in several exhibitions and interviews. And I think that the introduction of this author could be interesting even to better understand how Kiefer relates his artwork to Heidegger himself, because in some passages the two authors are, despite their significant theoretical differences, are compared by Kiefer himself. And in my analysis, I briefly introduce my somehow argument. This author represents respectively an iconophile and iconoclast approach, which both are relevant in Kiefer's own understanding of art and are put in a paradoxical dialogue. I will try to be synthetic and to conclude my presentation on this topic. From the hermeneutic conversation between Kiefer and Heidegger, it becomes evident the importance of ontology of art, but also ontology of image in Kiefer's perspective. Kiefer's fascination with the historical controversy over images, explicitly treated in works such as the one you can see in the slide, the iconoclastic controversy, reflects a sustained meditation on the tension between iconophile and iconoclast positions. Here the reference is to the historical Byzantine iconoclastic debates of the 8th and 9th centuries. In the image, Kiefer represented a very abstract artistic palette surrounded by several names of theologians and philosophers who participated to this discussion about the role of images, which for Kiefer becomes a discussion around the function and form of art itself. The iconophiles defended the anagogic and symbolic power of images, claiming that visual forms could guide the viewer toward higher realities. The iconoclasts, by contrast, warned that all representation risks conflating creator and creature, substituting the finite artifact for the infinite referent. In Kiefer, this opposing stance, in my opinion, coexist in a paradoxical yet fertile dialectic. His art embodies both the desire to access transcendence through the image and the impulse to negate or destroy the same image, and now recognizing its inadequacy. This paradox is deepened through Kiefer's philosophical references, most notably to Martin Heidegger and Andrea Emo, the two thinkers he most explicitly identifies as sources of philosophical inspiration. With due caution, one may suggest that in Kiefer's reception, Heidegger functions as a point of access to an iconophile ontology of art, as we have seen also in several paintings, while Emo aligns more with an iconoclast one. Yet both thinkers display reversals that resist any rigid classification. Their interplay mirrors Kiefer's own heterogeneous vision, not oppositional, but structured through complementary polarities. Kiefer's recognition of a processual ontology implies that art, in his view, can never be fully comprehended or exhausted by interpretation. There is always an excess of being and meaning that transcends the grasp of logos, a limitation that Kiefer finds both frustrating and productive. Modern instrumental reason, in particular, he suggests, is insufficient to approach the untamed territories of the sacred, of the transcendence, of the unfounded foundation. To counter this insufficiency, Kiefer seeks to cultivate other faculties, meditative, introspective, and poetic modes of knowing. His critique of rationalism extends to philosophical logos itself. As Kiefer notes, and I quote a sentence by an interview, the logos divides, draws a distinction between being and non-being, creating a chronology. But ultimately there is not nothingness and then being. Rather, they exist simultaneously. Being is the perfectly real presence of the non-being itself. This statement resonates deeply with the negative metaphysics of Andrea Emo, who becomes a key interlocutor in articulating the paradoxical ontology of nothingness. Through Emo, Kiefer discovers a rigorous philosophical framework for a theme that had long animated his artistic intuition, the creative and revelatory power of negation. Kiefer also interprets Heidegger's concepts of das Nichts, nothing, not as the simple opposition of being, but as its complementary domain, a dynamic process expressed in Heidegger's notion of das Nichten des Nichts, the annihilating of nothing. In this sense, both Heidegger and Emo offer different pathways towards understanding how art discloses the tension between being and nothingness, between revelation and erasure. For Kiefer, art can never be fully comprehended as a linear or resolvable practice. Instead, it is characterized by an aporetic dimension, a feature also explicitly recognized by Emo himself. From this shared ontological perspective arises Kiefer's discomfort in speaking about his own art, which is a declaration he made in many interviews, a paradoxical tension given his frequent discussion, actually, of his work. Andrea Emo was particularly influential for Kiefer's 2022 exhibition in Italy, in Venice, at Palazzo Ducale, whose title, translated in English, "These writings, once burned, will finally cast a little light," is an explicit quotation from Emo's text. And you can see in the picture one of the beautiful space within Palazzo Ducale where Kiefer's paintings were displayed. The title of the exhibition is derived, as I was saying, from a sentence by Emo, who was discovered by Kiefer only in 2015 through the German translation of Emo's Il Dio Negativo, that's the Italian title, The Negative God, the literal English translation, which has been published in German with the title Metamorphose des Nichts, Philosophische Fragmente, that can be translated Metamorphosis of the Nothing, Philosophical Fragments. And Kiefer recalls the significance of this encounter in an interview. Here I put the quotation, it's a bit long, so I don't entirely read it, but Kiefer underlines the importance of this author, and especially about the idea that everything we do, or everything, already contains its own negation. An image without iconoclasm is a desecrated mystery. So the importance of iconoclastic perspective as a way of refusing the substantialist assumption of artwork as a fixed and determined and finished something. Instead, Emo postulates an original, unfounded principle that he defines in Italian with the word nulla, which can be translated as nothingness. At the beginning, there is no specific being. Since each being is determined and contingent, it is something rather than something else. There is no being, thus no thing, nothing, nothingness. And this aporetic metaphysical perspective becomes very influential on Kiefer. In Kiefer's aesthetic cosmology, Heidegger and Emo emerge, in my opinion, as dual poles within a single field of tension, the iconophile disclosure of being and the iconoclastic revelation of nothingness. Between these extremes, Kiefer's art unfolds as an ongoing hermeneutic of the abyss, a continuous negotiation between the evocative power of symbols and the radical annihilating force of negation. Kiefer's work does embody what might be called a cosmological iconoclasm, images that strive toward transcendence even as they self-destruct, revealing truth not through permanence but through decay. The dialectic of creation and destruction, visibility and effacement, becomes for Kiefer the site where both Heidegger's concept of unconcealment, aletheia, and Emo's concept of nulla, nothingness, converge. Through this paradoxical synthesis, Kiefer's art ultimately staged the coexistence of the iconophile and the iconoclast, of the poet and the annihilator. It is in this tension between being and nothing that Kiefer's most profound ontological insight takes form. With this final reflection and comparison, I conclude my presentation, and I thank you very much for the attention and for the participation.
Thank you very much, Luca, for very interesting presentation. Now we have time for discussion and Q&A section. For those who are interested, could, as I said, could write this on YouTube chat in Portuguese or English, and we could present to you. Furthermore, we have here, as I also put my follow presented verbally, but only in the chat, we have the presence of Dr. Laura Mosburger, who was a specialist in Heidegger aesthetics and contemporary aesthetics as well. So now we are open to discussion. Meanwhile, I don't know if someone of you, perhaps someone in the chat will start it. If not, I have a question. I don't know.
Romulo, are there people in the chat that already posed some questions?
Not yet. We have, I believe they are writing or someone. So we could start the discussion. I don't know if you'd like to draw some points. I have some a quick question also, but
you want to start?
I have a question. I don't know if it's relevant. It's just a matter of clarification or slash provocation. The concept of transcreation that you posed, it implies, if I understood right, that the artwork modifies the original meaning of the philosophical text, right? And furthermore, does this concept of transcreation differs from or complement Benjamin's concept of Fortleben, the text afterlife, which also you quoted, Luca? Do both approach grant the same degree of the autonomy to derived work? And on the other hand, and that's the first question, that's the provocation, how do you see this notion of autonomy derived from a transcreation and a fortleben, that the work of art continues, to quote Kiefer, and you quote Kiefer, to work on its own? How do you see this notion, for instance, and as an Italian, you will understand me, when the director and poet and critic Pier Paolo Pasolini, who was atheist and homosexual and a communist sui generis, when he states that if you were born in West after Christ, you are in some way, in some degree, Christianized. I mean, this will reverberates in you consciously or unconsciously. What I want to say is, to what extent this transcreation, this resonance, is autonomous at this point. We could, I don't know if it makes sense what I'm trying to ask you, but I'd like to hear you about this.
Thank you very much. I think the question is extremely interesting and also complex. So I try to give you some ideas, some insights that come to my mind. First of all, with this concept, I would like to stress, hopefully with a perspective which in my interpretation is shared by Heidegger and Kiefer, the idea of the process of artistic elaboration and creation somehow outside subjectivism and the idea of the primacy of author's intentionality. So the idea that when, to put it simple, that when an artist refers to a source of inspiration, in this case, philosophical text, the right philosophical way to address this process is to merely imagine the subjective mind of the author collecting information and somehow transcribing them. Instead, I think it's possible to hermeneutically interpret, understand the importance of meaning, of the presence of layers of meaning, of content, of images, which are somehow present and endowed with a specific ontological dimension, and then they somehow radiate in different contexts and through different media. That's why particularly I've tried to stress this idea through this concept of transcreation, which is, by the way, not my merely my idea, but I have encountered in a conference to which I participate, which was all devoted to the concept of transcreation, the context of artistic translation. So the idea that the processes through which concepts, images, words switch and transfer from different media can be defined as transcreation, because in every passage it is possible to recognize a real process of innovation and transformation of these images, concepts, and words. And in this sense, I have tried to refer to the autonomy of the artwork, not in terms of autonomy from life, but autonomy as sort of autonomous life of the artwork, which can circulate and somehow expand its own history of effects, quoting Gadamer, transforming in a metamorphic process its own extension of conceptual applicability. Of course, I understand that this concept entails also a dangerous side, because the risk is to lose the specific meaning described in an image or concept. So, of course, the invitation is not to imagine that every concept or idea can be completely reversed or betrayed in other artistic or conceptual forms, but that there is a sort of spontaneous autonomous life of concepts which makes the original ideas and concepts richer and broader. So in this sense, I look at Kiefer's artistic production in this connection and dialogue with Heidegger as a sort of visual expansion of Heidegger's own text, philosophical production. I don't know if I have properly answered.
No, thank you very much. I was reminded some concepts of the difference, like Umberto Eco phrase between interpretation and over-interpretation. I have to this idea come into my mind when say there is the risk to go, since we have this autonomous life of a work of art. Someone could take it and and move it to another place, but I have to deal with a little more deeper. But thank you very much for an answer. I don't know if Laura, do you want something?
Question is, I think it's in the same line, but in another direction. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, Luca, for your lecture. And I found this thesis very insightful, the idea that Kiefer's work performs a transcreation of Heidegger thought, specifically in the sense, at least it's how I understood, in the way that it reverberates back into philosophy itself. So the artwork can pose questions to the philosophical theory. And I was thinking while reading your draft, I was taking some notes, and a question struck me. I believe maybe your arguments already have the seeds of an answer. I'm not sure, but it touches this issue of something that reverberates back into Heidegger's philosophy from Kiefer's work. Well, I think you brilliantly demonstrated how Kiefer is not merely an illustrator of Heidegger. And following the internal logic of your thesis, I kind of arrived at what seemed to me a central and productive tension. I think you focused on some proximities, which I agree, the ontological disclosure, but I was thinking about something that seems to be a radical difference between Heidegger and Kiefer, which would be the contrast between Heidegger's canonical examples and the imagery and the raw materials of Kiefer's world. As we know, Heidegger speaks of the Greek temple and Van Gogh's peasant shoes. These are the I believe these are the two most important examples in the origin of the work of art. And whether in the grandeur of the temple or the simplicity of the shoes, there is a sense of integrity to the world that is revealed. It is an opening of a world that seems to presuppose somewhat of a coherent ground of meaning, or at least a pure soil from which the work of art can be held up as world disclosing. Now, when you argue that Kiefer transcreates Heidegger's thought, I was thinking about how he does so from a place of ruins, from burned straw, lead, and scorched earth. He does not present us with the world to be founded from a pure space of possible formation. It's not a pure soil as Heidegger's example of the Greek temple, or even the Van Gogh's painting of the peasant shoes. He confronts us with a world already shattered, and nonetheless insists on seeking meaning from its very fragments. So the question would be, if the core of the transcreation that Kiefer's proposes wouldn't be the fact that while he confronts us with ruins, or at least when he joins ruins with meaning, with possible meaning, isn't he providing a very provoking insight to return to the theory in a way that tensions and expands the very limits of this theory, because Heidegger's theory clearly deals with it seems to me to deal with the pure soil of possible meanings. I was thinking also when he interprets Georg Tracht's poetry, which is a poetry really marked by ruins and a world in ruin. And in Heidegger's interpretation, what is highlighted is more the luminous aspects of Tracht's poetry, the luminous and coherent aspects. So it seems that Heidegger's approach is not specifically looking at this realm of experience of destruction. So I'd like to hear you if you agree. What are your thoughts? If you think it's a way to confront the theory from the works.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this reflection, which is not only, I would say, a question, but a really insightful comment. And I thank you very much, because I think you have touched a very interesting and consistent point, and I will reflect deeper on that, because I think it's quite relevant. And I agree that this difference you have thematized is consistent. What I could say right now is that Kiefer's positioning towards the topic of ruins, fragmentations, it's quite controversial, also in the artistic and philosophical discussion. There are different interpretations which, in my opinion, are somehow allowed by Kiefer's own ambiguity. And in my perspective, his deconstructive interest for fragmentation is somehow not conceived really as the final ending point of somehow human and cultural research. Instead, while studying, especially my thesis, is references to myth, symbols, and religious traditions, I've tried to contextualize his research within the contemporary debate on the so-called post-secular age. So this huge debate around the complex phenomena which are taking place in contemporary age in a period marked by, of course, the complete refusal of pre-modern traditional civilization, but at the same time of the crisis of modern rationality. And Kiefer aesthetic research seems to me an attempt also to answer, or at least not maybe to find now a definitive answer, but to open mankind to the listening, to the act of listening to the sacred, to a form of immanent transcendence. And this aspect, in my opinion, has some possible comparison, although maybe just on the surface. I think we need more reflection on that, but also with Heidegger's attitude towards the sacred, with the concept of the last God, this idea that mankind needs to prepare itself to a disclosure which cannot be right now rational structure, but can be prepared, trying to resonate with this new event. And so in my perspective, Kiefer's attempt to artistically valorize and thematize all the ruins and fragments he sees in contemporary sensitivity is somehow an attempt to open the viewer to this event, which Kiefer seems not able to visually fix, but somehow he seems interested in evoking, in preparing. In this sense, I agree that there is probably a significant difference of somehow aesthetic preferences, and it's also connected partially maybe to the historical period. Kiefer, however, formed his artistic expertise in the Second World War period, marked by radical avant-garde, and so of course with somehow stylistic and artistic tendencies which are different from maybe Heidegger's own cultural priorities, and that has also detains also a theoretical meaning. But in my opinion, what I would like just to point out that this focus on ruins, fragmentation, destruction in Kiefer as not only, so to speak, a negative side, but also it's conceived as an act of contemplation of the possibilities of the world, and also on the power of nature, conceived as this cosmological force from which the forms of life appear and disappear in this sort of eternal dance of elements, figures, forms, and shapes. And so thank you for the comment. I've tried to somehow answer, although I think more reflections are required in this direction.
Thank you.
I have a question, perhaps a begging for elucidation or a doubt. Since you mentioned this concept of ruin and also in Kiefer's work, I was wondering if ruin, the idea of ruin, could be thought as a form of open temporality, something akin to the Heideggerian Augenblick, in which the past reveals itself as a potential for the future, not only a negative, but ruin as something else. That would be, I don't know if it makes sense somehow, some way.
Yeah, I agree. This is interpretation which I think could be coherent. I've never explicitly found in Kiefer's own declarations, but it's very it moves toward the direction I was trying to argue. So, and I think he also somewhere affirmed something such as ruins are not just a symbol of destruction, but also a possibility for the future. So this idea of ruin as a sort of bridge between the past and the future, and metamorphic, and a symbol of the metamorphic nature of reality, I think it's well connected to Kiefer's sensitivity. And also, maybe I can add just a brief consideration regarding his idea of temporality. Kiefer is extremely interested in religions, and especially in monotheism, and especially in Jewish tradition. But the only aspect he always open criticize is the linear and eschatological conception of time. He always declares himself more sensible towards a conception of time where this cosmogonic power, creative power of nature is considered something without an end and a beginning. So I would say a sort of circular or spiraliform shape of time. And in this sense, also when he depicts images connected to Jewish traditions, it's clear that the ruins are not considered the ultimate sign of the end of time. They are not symbol of apocalyptic time, but they are always a transition towards something else, towards a different future that is possible to be built and projected.
Thank you very much, Luca. We have we have a question here. I write in the comments you received, and I will share on the screen. I believe that's expansion of your presentation, but if you want to speak about it, it will be how might the notion of transcreation be applied to other artistic forms, for instance, cinema or digital art, while maintaining its ontological meaning rather than merely an intertextual one? if you wonder that sometime, or is in your perspective of your work.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the main idea surrounding, at least the way I read and interpret this concept, is connected primarily to this intrinsic meaningful power of images and concepts. So I think somehow this concept is more interesting from a interpretative and analytic point of view more than I don't know, a pragmatic point of view. So it's a different perspective to read and perceive cultural phenomena. In this sense, the transfer of concepts, images, often archetypes, we could say, from different media, or as mentioned in the case of intertextuality, textual domains, could be interpreted as the autonomous life of these concepts and images, which appear capable of connecting to the spirit of time, to the human individual creativity, and so to act as a sort of virus, so to speak, reaching different domains and acquiring through metamorphic processes new shapes, forms, and functions. In this way, somehow the subjective agency, which of course plays a role, but appears to be not the only source of creativity, but more, and this is perfectly coherent with Kiefer's own view, a sort of medium or chain of transmission of this meaning and knowledge. And when I spoke about the retroactive function of this process, I refer to the idea that despite the necessity of contextualizing from an historical point of view the specific determination of concepts, images, and meanings, the historical spread of these processes de facto, concretely transforms the perception of these images and concepts, and so somehow their life. And indeed, this is quite resonant, in my view, with Gadamer's notion of history of affects, which was mentioned by Gadamer as a way to read the real, the truthful meaning of a text as somehow the sum and dialogue of all the interpretation of this text. In this way, we could say that the life and the meaning of a theory is enriched also by the artistic re-elaboration of this theory in different artistic or media domains. That's of course could appear a little bit a paradoxical perspective, because we are more used to interpret artistic processes through very subjective based perspective, so as the decision and creation of an artist. That's of course phenomenologically is true, but this from an hermeneutic point of view, I think that this other perspective can help to somehow achieve to achieve a different perspective, which can be integrated to the other ones in order to vivify somehow the cultural discussion. And from my point of view, being the fact that my expertise is especially on visual art, I think that this perspective could be interesting also, for example, in the context of art criticism. So the attempt to analyze, interpret artworks not only through the concepts and will explicitly declared by the artist himself, but also through these cultural resonances, the interpolation and interconnection of sources, which sometimes are more explicit, in other cases can appear also as unconscious dynamics, but can somehow enrich the full interpretation. Although, as we have already pointed out several times, this approach needs to be balanced with the historical, theoretical, and biographical knowledge in order not to somehow produce incoherent and inconsistent perspective.
Thank you very much for your consideration. I don't know, Laura, do you want to add some comment or,
I'll just say that this last point that Luca answered, I think I was thinking in that direction when I made my question, that from Kiefer's works we can amplify the concepts in a way of a dialogue between the works of art and Heidegger's thought on art. Maybe the works can pose questions to the theory, and we know we have to separate the theory, the primal theory, the work, and what can be drawn from the dialogue from of both. So I think it's just to point that I was not only marking a difference just to be a difference, but the idea that it can resonate in the philosophy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I really agree.
I would like to, if I have time, just to ask you, just to curious, since you mentioned during your presentation the concept of sacred, and lately you have said that this, as you were, viral aspects of the contamination with the work of art. I would like to ask you the how do you see the whole of this sacredness of work of art in this cultural resonance, like the how important is the is as you were, unspeakable share of the work of art in this cultural resonance dimension. How do you, if you consider that this is relevant or not?
Yeah. I will say it's a very complex issue. I will try to answer from this perspective, from the following perspective. Kiefer's artistic production is extremely rich in terms of citations. I have mentioned many writers, but they are really a small amount of the artist's who are inspiring Kiefer, and we need to add the philosophers. I've mentioned some, and also symbols derived from religious tradition, myth, symbol, mysticism, from east to west. So there is a sort of encyclopedic attempt, although not structured in a classic encyclopedic way, but always in this somehow postmodern, fragmented sensitivity. And in my perspective, Kiefer's impulse toward the sacred is strictly connected to this feeling of wonder towards beings. So the idea that there is a deep beauty in life, also in the dialectic between happiness and tragedy, and within this eternal process of transformation. And all the images that he tries to visually rework and implement, taken both from literature, philosophy, and sacred traditions, appear all as signs, manifestation of this sort of eternal disclosure of reality. And so in this way, it is possible to try to understand how Kiefer can refer to such different sources. So from especially in religious field. So we have paintings devoted to angels, to the Christian saints, even to Trinity, and then Jewish mysticism, yoga, pagan traditions, but they seem all treated with respect and fascination. And I think there is a sort of, although it is not philosophically theorized, but a sort of spiritual syncretism in Kiefer's perspective. The idea that all these traditions offer possible interpretation, schemes of orientation, which helps man to somehow grasp something meaningful from reality, to give order, to give shape of reality, to and to relate with this deep origin, which Kiefer never specifically determines, because it's always something which exceeds the rationality, the language, and this is also an aspect which, of course, in Kiefer is maybe less theoretically established, but I think it's somehow resonant, at least with some aspects of Heidegger's production. The idea of overcoming the metaphysical determination of the principle of being, and trying to somehow establish new way to find a relationship with it. The ways which Kiefer's establish are all based in artistic attempts to create something fascinating, engaging, and connecting the viewer to very ancient traditions, but directed to the future, to that openness, to the new, to the miracle, to the not yet, which seems to fascinate him. That's my attempt to answer, but yeah, the relationship between all these sources is very complicated, and probably is not has no real theoretical coherence, but the methodology and the sensitivity, I think, is really meaningful and fascinating.
Yes, thank you very much. I was wondering, perhaps I should, but I could clarify my question. What I was when I said about the sacred and the spiral and cultural perspective. As you quote, and as you said, that these icons, these figures that Kiefer present in his paintings, I draw a parallel in my mind with the idea of sacred and resonance of assemblies with a perspective, connection, meaningful connection with the meaning of with the movies of Andrei Tarkovsky, for instance, when he presents several, he has this they have this sacred atmosphere even when he's not even when his movies are not specific or evidently on a religious subject, but we have all these figures, statues and icons of Russian paintings, be it whether in the Stalker or the Solaris, that we have these ideas, and that's what I want to say that about the sacredness, the role of the sacredness to build this connection, even when the subject is not sacred in a religious sense, but to bring about these figures that are really meaningful for people, for the audience in different things. This is but I agree with you. My mistake if I did not formulate my question or my comment in a clear way, but I think that if I think it right, I think that it will be able to draw a connection between them. I don't know.
Yeah, thank you. The example of Solaris particularly fits because I have seen a beautiful giant painting by Kiefer explicitly devoted to Solaris. Although I think that the main reference was the book by Lem, and it was displayed 2 or 3 years ago in Vienna within the opera theater, and it was really fascinating. It was a sort of a very abstract painting, as a sort of meditation on the natural elements, I would say. Yeah, I think your reflections are interesting, and they somehow add another possible level of interpretation. Of course, the sacred is never theologically conceived in a specific way by Kiefer, although probably, at least from a quantitative point of view, the tradition in which he is more interested is the Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, and this kind of tradition. What I can add as a somehow curiosity, of course, for my research, I've tried to read everything I could, also especially searching for Kiefer's reflections and in interviews and declarations, texts about religious topics. And he always shows this fascination for these topics, but it's never clear if he really somehow, if he has faith or or if he just interprets them as cultural events. The only explicit declaration I found repeated 2 or 3 times, so is something with a meaning, is that he defines himself animist, in the sense that outside any specific dogmatic tradition, he has this idea that everything and matter itself, which his represents his, we could say, partner in crime when he deals with artistic production, because he works with matter, is somehow inhabited by spirit. And I think that with the word spirit, it means somehow meaning, as we were saying. So that there is always this a sort of autonomous life and meaning also within things. So he always stressed the fact that as artist, he doesn't want to impose his ideas on the objects he's working on, but he tries more to let them manifest their essence, their nature. And this is somehow a sort of post-secular idea of the sacred within historical time, within daily life, and so looking at everything, trying to connect to the rhythm of life, to the meaning of things, not impose our own will on reality, but find a sort of dialogue.
Okay, thank you very much, Luca, for the comments. I know, Laura, if you want to add something more, I'm looking at the chat with an.
I just a curiosity. I couldn't help associating the imagery of Kiefer's works to some of the scenery from Georg Trakhl's poems. And I was thinking, well, you showed how he has a dialogue with Paul Celan and Ingeborg Bachmann. Would he by chance have written something about Georg Trakl at any point? Does it make sense to you, that association? Because especially because the way that Trakl deals with destruction is always at the same time pervaded with a sense of sacredness as well, and very symbolic, and I see somewhat of the same spirit.
Probably is another kind of these resonances we were mentioning. As long as I know, I don't remember explicit references to Trakl. I don't remember, nor in interviews, neither in artistic works. I can't exclude at all, because Kiefer production is really extremely huge, but at least I'm sure that is not a really relevant source. And unfortunately, I'm not. I don't have a deep knowledge on Trakl, so I'm not able to find this connection, but it seems an interesting path, and somehow, he's another author who is part of this great German poetical tradition, which was very important both for Heidegger and Kiefer. Although, with different preferences, because also Hölderlin, as long as I know, is not present, or at least probably is mentioned in one of those paintings with all the names of German intellectual and artists, if I remember right. But I don't know any artwork devoted to his poetry. Whereas both Bachmann and Celan are really significant, especially, yeah, both, I would say.
So, if there are no more questions, we're about to reach 2 hours of discussion, grateful presentation. So I would like to thank you, both of you, Luca, for presentation and discussion, and Laura for participation and interest questions and reasoning. And for everyone who was watching it, it will remain on our YouTube channel, and also the chat there. It happens sometimes people watch and rewatch and put some comments, and and so we're like the idea that the work on its own also happens in our channel after sometimes someone puts some comments, and we have this it already happened. The discussion still alive even after the presentation. Once again, thank you, both of you. Thank you, everyone for watching, and
thank you. Thank you very much again for the invitation, and especially for the real insightful and passionate discussion. It was a pleasure for me to share ideas with you, and I thank also the people watching the discussion, and see you soon, hopefully.
I'd like to thank you both too, Romulo, for inviting me to share this moment, and Luca for your very insightful presentation. It was very, very interesting to hear, and I am looking forward to watch Wim Wenders' movie on Kiefer.
Thank you very much, and see you next time.